By the time Nia Langston reached the trustees' table, Evelyn Cross Langston had already lifted the Navy briefing folder from beside her place setting. The silver structural grid emblem caught the chandelier light as Evelyn carried it past 7 trustees, 2 foundation executives, 3 donors, and the resident representatives waiting near the far end of Calder House's dining room. She set the folder at the outside vendor's table beside an empty chair, then removed Nia's printed presentation card from its brass holder. Dr. Nia Langston, independent technical director, disappeared beneath Evelyn's manicured hand. Nia sometimes mistakes being welcomed as family for being appointed as an expert, she said into the dinner microphone, smiling as if she had offered an affectionate family joke. A few guests lowered their eyes. Others looked directly at Nia, waiting for anger, embarrassment, or retreat. Everett Langston sat at the center of the trustees' table beneath a portrait of the Foundation's first harbor project. He saw the folder in Evelyn's hand. He saw his daughter standing where her chair had been. He said nothing. Nia felt the humiliation land with the clean pressure of a door closing, but she did not give Evelyn the reaction the room had been invited to witness. She placed one hand lightly against the back of the displaced chair and looked at the printed agenda. Her name was missing. On the digital copy she had received that morning, her technical briefing appeared between the Risk Committee report and the Harbor Homes funding discussion. On the paper version, now resting before the trustees, those 12 minutes had been replaced by donor acknowledgments. Who authorized the agenda change? Nia asked. Her voice was level enough that the servers continued pouring water. Evelyn gave a small laugh. This is dinner, Nia, not a deposition. Miriam Shaw, the Foundation's governance chair, stopped unfolding her napkin. She was a silver-haired former university president who had spent the opening reception asking precise questions about contractor oversight. That was not her question, Miriam said. Evelyn's smile tightened. The benefit office finalized the evening flow. We thought it best to keep technical detail out of the family occasion. Rafael Ortiz, chair of the Risk Committee, looked down at the folder already placed before him. Nia's name appeared on the cover beneath the title Harbor Homes Retrofit Initiative. His copy carried the same distribution code as the folder Evelyn had removed. We received these as trustee briefing materials, he said, not family background. Evelyn turned toward him with the practiced warmth she used on donors. Of course, Nia contributed several useful observations. Nia did not correct the word contributed. She opened the contractor specification packet she had carried under her arm and looked again at the revision she had marked in the corridor 10 minutes earlier. The coastal corrosion allowance listed in the original steel schedule was absent from the substitute anchoring section. It was not a cosmetic omission. The Harbor Homes building stood less than half a mile from tidal water, where every connection had to survive years of salt exposure before it ever faced hurricane loading. Dr. Helen Price, the engineering trustee, noticed the pencil mark. What did you find? Evelyn reached for the microphone again. Helen, perhaps we can leave work until after dessert. Miriam's gaze stayed on Nia. Dr. Langston? Nia turned the packet so Helen could see the revision number. The contractor's substitute anchor removes the specified corrosion allowance and changes the connection geometry. I have not found an approved engineering basis for either change. The room shifted, not dramatically. No one gasped, but the discomfort Evelyn had created around Nia moved toward the document in her hand. Is that a safety issue? Raphael asked. It requires review before anyone represents the substitution as equivalent. Nia said, the current savings estimate depends on it. Evelyn stepped away from the microphone and lowered her voice. You are not here to alarm people over a line item. I'm here because 84 occupied apartments are attached to that line item. Leah Morgan, seated with the resident delegation, lifted her chin. She had spent 14 years inspecting municipal housing before returning to the neighborhood where her mother still lived. And because our committee asked her to be here, Leah said. Everett finally moved. He touched Evelyn's wrist, not to stop her, but to guide the evening forward. Let's sit down, he murmured. We can fix the seating later. Nia looked at him. The old pain was not that he failed to understand. It was that he understood enough to make the harm smaller in language. "The issue is not the chair," she said. "It is who changed the appointment record." Everett's eyes flicked toward Miriam, then toward the donors. "Not tonight." That answer clarified more than an apology would have. Nia walked to the outside vendor's table and sat without lowering her head. She aligned 3 items in front of her: the digital agenda on her tablet, the altered printed agenda, and the contractor specification sheet. Power in the room had shifted her chair, erased her title, and made a joke of her work. It had not changed what the steel would have to withstand. While Evelyn resumed her welcome, Nia examined the footer on the revised agenda. The file had been printed at 4:43 p.m., less than 2 hours before dinner, from a device assigned to the benefit office. The user identifier ended with ECL. Across the room, Miriam watched Nia photograph the footer and place the altered page inside her folder. Nia looked once toward Evelyn, who was thanking the trustees for protecting the foundation's reputation. The humiliation had not been spontaneous. Evelyn had prepared it before the first guest arrived. Nia stayed through the first course because leaving would have allowed Evelyn's version of the evening to harden without resistance. She did not demand her chair back. She did not ask Everett to introduce her properly. She listened as Evelyn described Harbor Homes as a philanthropic renovation that would refresh the community while minimizing inconvenience. Language polished enough to conceal that 84 families might be moved from their homes during hurricane season. When Raphael asked where residents would live during the most disruptive phase, Evelyn glanced toward a donor liaison. "The contractor has assured us that suitable temporary accommodations can be arranged." Leah's fingers tightened around her water glass. Miriam turned to Nia. "Your briefing mentions an occupied building sequence. Can you answer the question?" Every face returned to her, but the invitation now came from a trustee rather than her father. Nia opened the folder Evelyn had displaced. "The current contractor sequence clears all 4 buildings in 2 waves," she said. "My revised sequence reinforces the exterior frames first, then works inward by vertical zone. 79 of the 84 households can remain safely occupied. 5 households require short-term relocation because of medical access and structural constraints." Helen leaned forward. "How many relocation days?" "The contractor's plan projects 1,176 household days. The revised plan reduces that to 96. The number ended Evelyn's attempt to keep the discussion abstract. Leah nodded once, not in gratitude, but in confirmation. She had helped Nia map medication deliveries, wheelchair routes, elevator outages, and the hours when home health workers entered each building. Evelyn folded her hands. "Those are preliminary figures prepared by someone with a personal interest in seeing her proposal adopted." Nia looked at Miriam rather than Evelyn. "The resident committee has the assumptions and can challenge them." "We already did," Leah said. "Twice." A trustee named Thomas Keene opened his copy of Nia's briefing folder. Why was this removed from the agenda if residents and trustees had reviewed it? Evelyn answered before the foundation secretary could speak. "Because the evening was becoming confused. Nia's relationship to Everett creates an appearance problem, and I thought it wiser not to place the trustees in an awkward position." "The appearance problem existed before tonight," Miriam said. "Our charter has a process for it." She turned to the secretary. "Was Dr. Langston's appointment rescinded?" "Not that I have received," the secretary said. Then the agenda change did not alter her appointment. Evelyn's expression remained pleasant, but her thumb pressed hard against the stem of her glass. Nia recognized the moment Evelyn understood that social control and institutional authority were not the same thing. It was not a victory. Miriam had not defended Nia's qualifications. She had defended the existence of a process. That distinction mattered. Everett seemed to recognize it too. During the break between courses, he found Nia in the side corridor near the old harbor maps. "I can put you back on the schedule tomorrow," he said quietly. "A smaller session. No the owners. You can walk the trustees through everything." "Who removed me tonight?" Evelyn thought the room was too exposed. "You saw the agenda." He paused. That pause contained the answer. "I saw there had been changes." "Before dinner?" "Yes." And you let her introduce me as a family volunteer. Everett exhaled, irritated less by the accusation than by the impossibility of softening it. I was trying to prevent a scene. You prevented yourself from having to choose in public. His face tightened. Nia, the foundation is trying to close a major funding package. If donors think the board is trapped inside a family dispute, they may freeze commitments. Let me repair this privately. Restoring a speaking slot is not repair. What do you want me to do? Nothing that substitutes your influence for the process, Evelyn bypassed. She held out the two agenda versions. I'm filing a technical integrity notice in the morning. It will request independent review of the anchor substitution and the appointment change. Everett's eyes moved to the papers. That will trigger a procurement hold. It may. You could stop the entire project. The substituted system could stop it later, after people are living under it. Give me 24 hours. The funding vote is in 48. Then give me until noon. Nia shook her head. The notice deadline is 10. He lowered his voice. Do not force the trustees to choose between you and Evelyn. They should not choose between people. They should choose whether the rules apply. Everett looked past her toward the dining room, where Evelyn stood laughing with two donors as if the evening had gone exactly as planned. You always make everything structural, he said. Once, when Nia was 12, that would have sounded like admiration. He had shown her how stacked shipping crates carried weight through their corners, and she had spent the afternoon moving them until the damaged pier stopped swaying beneath their feet. Now the sentence meant she refused to let affection conceal load-bearing failure. Structures are what remain after everyone finishes explaining what they meant, she said. Back at the vendor's table, Nia opened the full procurement packet. The substitute anchor recommendation had been issued 3 days after Cross Meridian received preferred bid status. The revised cost sheet promised savings large enough to protect Evelyn's donor campaign. Nia turned to the company disclosure page. The beneficial owners section was blank. An intermediary holding company appeared where an individual name should have been. She searched the foundation's internal vendor directory and found no supporting declaration. At the trustees' table, Miriam was quietly asking the secretary for the original appointment resolution. Raphael requested the document distribution log. Helen photographed the anchor specification number. The trustees were not standing up for Nia. Not yet. They were observing the gaps Evelyn had created. Nia began drafting the notice on her tablet. She listed the missing corrosion allowance, the substitute geometry, the altered agenda, the absent ownership disclosure, and her own unresolved field note from the preliminary survey. She included the last item, even though it could be used against her. An independent process could not be credible if she submitted only the evidence that protected her. At 9:17 p.m., she opened the state business registry from her phone and entered the intermediary company's name. The first result showed a Savannah mailing address she recognized. It belonged to an office used by Evelyn's brother. At 9:58 the next morning, Nia submitted the technical integrity notice to the foundation secretary, all 7 trustees, the insurer's compliance contact, and the resident committee. She requested preservation of every project record, suspension of the disputed anchor contract, independent load testing, complete related party disclosure, and recusal of anyone connected to the vendor. She also attached the incomplete field survey form that had kept her awake until 3. The form recorded a subcontractor's verbal request to change an access point, but lacked the required same-day confirmation. The omission had not altered her calculations, yet it was a procedural failure, and she named it as such. At 10:06, Miriam acknowledged receipt. The foundation charter required review once a technical integrity notice involved occupied housing and an undisclosed procurement relationship. By 10:18, Cross Meridian had been ordered not to destroy samples, correspondence, or revision files. By 10:31, Evelyn called. Withdraw it, she said without greeting. Nia stood at the window of her Atlanta office, looking down at a line of commuters moving through rain. No. Your father can restore your presentation. Miriam can correct the agenda. We can resolve the misunderstanding without frightening every donor attached to this project. The agenda is not the only issue. You found an incomplete form and decided it must be a conspiracy. I found an unapproved anchor substitution, an omitted corrosion requirement, and a blank ownership declaration. Silence lasted long enough for Nia to hear Evelyn breathe. You have no idea how these partnerships work, Evelyn said. I know how related party disclosure works. Be careful, Nia. You are not protected merely because Everett indulges you. This review cannot depend on him protecting me. Then you may discover how little authority you actually have. The call ended. Nia opened the public registry documents she had downloaded overnight. Cross Meridian Construction was owned through Meridian Coastal Holdings. The controlling member of that holding company was Grant Cross, Evelyn's older brother. The relationship itself was not proof of wrongdoing. The failure to disclose, it was the first breach. The altered specification, preferred bid timing, and Evelyn's effort to silence review formed a pattern that still required authentication. Nia sent the registry documents to Miriam with a note identifying them as unverified public source records pending procurement confirmation. She did not call them proof. At noon, she met Leah and 2 resident representatives at a neighborhood library conference room. Leah brought the committee's original engineer selection packet. You were ranked first before your name went to the trustees, she said. Your father didn't even know you applied until after the interviews. Keep the originals with the committee, Nia said. Send certified copies to the secretary. Leah studied her. You think they'll say you got the work because of him? Evelyn already has. Then why not let Everett confirm the timeline? Because his word cannot be the foundation of my role. Leah sat back. You know what residents saw last night? Not a billionaire's daughter being insulted. We saw the person who knew which elevators could be shut down without trapping Mrs. Green on the 4th floor. Nia looked away for a moment. Praise was easier to accept when it concerned calculations. Leah's words reached the place she kept guarded. The committee may be asked to testify, Nia said. That could put your grant at risk. Our grant is already at risk if the wrong contractor controls the work. At the foundation offices, Miriam convened an emergency governance call. Evelyn attended as benefit chair. Everett attended as founding benefactor, but had no vote on the notice. Nia joined remotely and presented only the sequence of records. When she finished, Evelyn held up the survey form Nia had disclosed. Before the board entertains accusations against a respected contractor, perhaps it should ask whether Dr. Langston followed her own procedures. Helen answered first. We will ask both questions. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Her documentation failure undermines the reliability of everything she submitted. It may undermine part of the field process, Helen said. That is why review separates technical validity from professional procedure. Raphael asked Evelyn whether she or any immediate relative held a financial interest in Cross Meridian or its parent entities. Evelyn did not hesitate. No material interest. Is Grant Cross your brother? Yes, but Grant has many investments. I do not manage them. Did you know he controlled Meridian Coastal Holdings? I knew he had business interests in construction. That does not make me a conflicted party. Miriam read from the foundation policy. Immediate family control of a bidding entity required disclosure whether or not the foundation officer received direct profit. Evelyn shifted her argument. I am not a foundation officer. You controlled the benefit agenda and circulated project materials, Miriam said. That is why the review will determine the extent of your role. Everett finally spoke. Can we pause before this becomes punitive? Nia closed her eyes briefly. Even now, his instinct was to slow the process at the moment it approached the person who had harmed her. The contract is paused, Miriam said. The review is not. After the call, Everett asked Nia to remain online. You have made your point, he said. Have I? Evelyn should have disclosed Grant's connection. I'll speak to her. She publicly removed my role because my review threatened that contract. You cannot know that yet. I know she had the altered agenda printed from her office. I know her office circulated the substitute recommendation. I know she denied a relationship the policy required her to disclose. And I know what this foundation will look like if donors believe my wife manipulated a safety contract against my daughter. You are still describing the appearance as the danger. His face hardened. Réputation keeps institution alive. Safety does too. Power could control the room, but could not make an unsafe design hold. Nia did not say the thought aloud. She let it settle into the silence between them. Everett tried once more. Withdraw the procurement accusation. Keep the technical review. I can guarantee your access is restored. A private guarantee from you would prove Evelyn's claim that my authority comes from my father. I'm trying to help you. Then stop trying to replace the institution. She ended the call before he could answer. That afternoon, the Foundation secretary delivered the first preserved metadata report. Evelyn's benefit office account had not merely printed the altered dinner agenda. It had distributed the revised cross-meridian memorandum to selected donors and staff 4 days earlier. Attached to that memorandum was a cost comparison based on the substitute anchor. Nia opened the document history. The earliest version contained a disclosure note identifying grant crosses controlling interest. In a version sent from Evelyn's office, that line had been deleted. Evelyn had not mocked Nia because she believed Nia lacked expertise. She had mocked her because Nia's expertise threatened the contract Evelyn needed to remain unquestioned. Nia's access badge stopped working before sunrise. The red light flashed against the glass doors of the Langston Harbor Foundation, and for one suspended second, she stood beneath her own reflection, holding the Navy briefing folder Evelyn had moved from the trustees' table. A security officer she knew by name stepped from behind the desk with an apology already forming. Temporary review protocol, he said. No project systems, no internal meetings, no site entry. Nia nodded once and handed him the badge instead of making him repeat the humiliation. Please log the time and the instruction source. He did. The Foundation could remove her access, but it could not erase the path by which she had earned it. She spent the morning rebuilding that path from records outside Evelyn's reach. Leah met her at the Harbor Homes community room with a dented archive box containing the Resident Technical Committee's original selection materials. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet, and beyond the windows, scaffolding framed the first apartment block without touching it. Leah spread the candidates' scoring sheets across a folding table. Nia's application number appeared without her surname on the first-round review. She had ranked highest in structural resilience, resident continuity, and occupied building sequencing. We did not know who your father was, Leah said. We knew who he was. We did not know you were his daughter until after the interviews. The distinction mattered enough that Nia photographed nothing until the Foundation secretary joined them by video and instructed Leah how to preserve the originals. Certified copies went directly into trustee custody. The submission timestamp showed that Nia had entered the process through the same portal as 6 other engineers. The interview notes documented objections to her accelerated survey schedule, praise for her relocation model, and a recommendation that she receive temporary co-signature support during the first phase. It was not a perfect record. It was credible because it contained doubt. By noon, the Foundation secretary had retrieved the formal appointment resolution from the governance archive. 6 trustees had approved Nia as independent technical director. Everett had neither voted nor attended the session. The appointment had been issued 3 weeks before he learned she had applied. Miriam called from a conference room where Raphael and Helen sat beneath the Foundation seal. The resolution is valid, she said. No rescission appears in the record. Then Evelyn had no authority to remove the role from the agenda, Nia said. Correct, Miriam replied. But the validity of your appointment does not resolve the engineering complaint. It should not. Helen's expression softened by a degree. Good. We are keeping the findings separate. The Foundation secretary also authenticated the distribution log from the dinner. Every trustee had received Nia's briefing folder under a controlled document number. Evelyn's benefit office had no authority to relabel it as family background. The evidence established that the dinner humiliation was not an awkward misunderstanding. It was an unauthorized attempt to replace an appointed role with a social label. Still, Nia knew that institutional legitimacy had two different loads to carry. One record could prove she belonged in the room. Only her work could prove she should direct the project. Miriam raised the identity issue last. Evelyn's donor memorandum implied that Nia had traded on a vague or disputed relationship to Everett. The Foundation's secretary verified Everett's historical family disclosures, Nia's legal record, and archive correspondence from her mother, Camille Reed Langston. The result corrected the insinuation without granting Nia a single professional privilege. "You are his direct legal daughter," Miriam said. "That fact does not appoint you. Protect your design or decide this review." "Exactly," Nia said. Everett's name could restore a fact Evelyn had distorted. It could not carry the weight of the role. After the call, Nia and Leah walked the eastern perimeter of Harbor Homes from the public sidewalk because Nia was barred from the site. She studied the anchor locations through the temporary fencing and compared them with photographs from her earlier survey. The contractor's substitute system required samples from 3 connection types, not one. Cross Meridian had preserved 2 sets, but the third remained in a locked materials container under contractor control. Nia documented the container number and sent the information to the neutral custodian. "You are still working," Leah said. "I am preserving what the reviewers need." "That sounds like working." Nia looked toward Building C, where Mrs. Green's wheelchair ramp had been rebuilt twice before anyone measured the turning radius correctly. "The project cannot depend on whether I am allowed through that gate." Late that afternoon, the secretary sent another recovered file. The original presentation schedule showing Nia's 12-minute trustee briefing, the altered version from Evelyn's office, and the version history recording the deletion. The same account had replaced independent technical director with family guest in an internal seating worksheet before the public agenda was printed. Nia stared at the phrase until the anger beneath her composure became almost physical. Evelyn had not simply taken a folder. She had attempted to manufacture a lesser role and make the room behave as though it had always existed. Then a new message appeared from the Foundation's donor relations server. Subject: immediate governance concern regarding Harbor Homes. Evelyn had sent it to 32 donors, 2 insurers, and every trustee. Attached was the first page of Nia's incomplete field survey form. The corrective filing, submitted hours before any complaint, was missing. The body accused Nia of using family access to conceal professional deficiencies. Nia read it twice, then forwarded the complete packet to Miriam without commentary. At the bottom of Evelyn's message was a notice for an emergency donor briefing scheduled the next morning. Nia's professional role had been authenticated. Evelyn was about to make the flaw in her record more public than the truth. The emergency donor briefing was held in a smaller ballroom across from the dining room, where Evelyn had first moved Nia's folder. The seating was less formal, but the audience was more dangerous. Trustees, insurers, donors, foundation counsel, contractor representatives, and resident delegates facing one another under the language of risk. Nia attended under the resident participation rule, not as project staff. Her access remained suspended, and a white visitor badge hung against her midnight blue dress like a deliberate attempt to reduce her again. Evelyn stood beside a projection screen displaying the incomplete survey form. She had enlarged the unsigned confirmation field until it dominated the page. "This is not about family," Evelyn told the room. "It is about whether a professional who bypasses basic documentation should control a project involving 84 homes." The phrasing was disciplined now. "No joke, no affectionitas." She had converted humiliation into a case for institutional caution. Nia sat beside Leah and kept her hands folded over the complete filing in her lap. Evelyn described her as Everett's daughter before naming her credentials. She said Nia had been given unusual access, had raised unsupported safety concerns after a personal disagreement, and had used a technical notice to retaliate against the Foundation. Then she displayed the original dinner agenda, only long enough to suggest that Nia's speaking role had been informal. Miriam interrupted. "Show the complete version history." Evelyn turned from the screen. "This is a donor briefing, not an evidentiary hearing." then stopped presenting partial evidence as a finding. The room tightened. Evelyn recovered quickly. The complete materials are under review. What donors need today is confidence that leadership recognizes the seriousness of Dr. Langston's failure. Helen leaned toward her microphone. Her documentation lapse is serious. So, is the omission of the corrective attachment from your presentation. Evelyn clicked to the next slide. It contained a paragraph from Cross Meridian's professional complaint, claiming Nia had introduced unnecessary testing to delay the contract. Raphael looked down at the printed complaint before him. This language is nearly identical to your donor memorandum. Because the facts are the same, or because the documents share a source. Evelyn's gaze hardened. That implication is inappropriate. A donor asked whether the project would lose insurance coverage. Before anyone could answer, the insurer's representative announced that coverage was being placed under provisional review pending validation of the samples, the engineering process, and the governance conflict. The Foundation's general counsel added that no construction activity could proceed without active coverage. A murmur moved through the room. Leo whispered, "This is what she wanted." Nia was not certain. Evelyn wanted Nia discredited. A complete project freeze threatened the contract Evelyn was protecting, but it also shifted blame toward the person who had triggered review. One of the donors asked Nia directly whether she had failed to document a subcontractor change request. Nia stood. "Yes, I failed to complete the same-day confirmation field." Evelyn's expression flickered with satisfaction. "Did that change your structural calculations?" Helen asked. "No. The request concerned an access location. I corrected the omission and disclosed it in the notice before Cross Meridian filed its complaint." Nia placed the full packet on the document table. The complete filing includes the correction timestamp. Evelyn stepped toward the microphone. After she had already exercised authority she may never have legitimately possessed. Miriam's voice turned cold. "The appointment resolution has been authenticated by trustees selected through Everett's foundation. The resident committee ranked her first before Everett knew she had applied," Leah said. Evelyn looked at her with a donor's smile emptied of warmth. "Your organization receives foundation funding, Ms. Morgan. I would be cautious about presenting advocacy as independence." The warning was quiet enough to remain deniable and clear enough that everyone heard it. Raphael wrote something on his pad. Nia rose again, not to defend Leah emotionally, but to protect the record. Her organization's funding is irrelevant to the selection documents. The originals are in trustee custody. Evelyn ignored her and addressed security. Dr. Langston is not current project staff. She has no standing to participate beyond the resident session. A uniformed supervisor approached. For the second time in 2 days, a public room watched to see whether Nia would be removed. Miriam lifted one hand. "She remains under the resident attendance provision until this session concludes." It was not a full defense. Miriam did not restore Nia's role. She enforced a rule that prevented Evelyn from erasing her presence again. Nia sat. The distinction remained essential. Donors began asking whether their commitments could be paused. 2 announced immediate holds. A third requested that the foundation separate harbor homes from its capital campaign. Evelyn used every question to return to Nia's surname, her survey form, and the appearance of family influence. She did not mention Grant Cross. Raphael finally asked her directly, "Do you have any relationship requiring disclosure under the related party policy?" Evelyn stood very still. "No material financial relationship." "That was not the question. My brother holds interests in many companies. I receive no profit from Cross Meridian." "Did you disclose his controlling interests?" "I did not consider it material." The answer entered the minutes. So did the fact that her office had circulated the contractor recommendation. The insurer's representative requested immediate suspension of the project agreement until the conflict review and technical tests were complete. Foundation counsel agreed. Nia's consulting contract was frozen. Her remaining system credentials were disabled. No project invoice, including hers, would be paid during the suspension. Cross Meridian's attorney announced that the company would seek damages if the contract failed because of what he called a reckless family dispute. Outside the ballroom, reporters had begun gathering after someone leaked the donor memorandum. Everett intercepted Nia near the service corridor. "Let me in this," he said. "Ow! I will tell the press you were properly appointed. I will cover temporary housing personally. I can ask the trustees to restore your contract while they review the rest. That would make every accusation about my access look true. People are going to lose their homes if this drags on. 5 households face temporary relocation under my plan. 84 face an unsafe contract if we skip review. You are willing to gamble with them to prove a principle." The accusation hit harder because it touched the fear Nia already carried. "No," she said. "I am refusing to let your money replace verification." Everett's frustration sharpened. "You always assume accepting help means surrender. From you, in this institution, it often means no one can tell where my work ends and your influence begins." He stepped back as if she had struck him. Nia walked past him into the rain without waiting for a car. By evening, 2 community partners had issued statements suspending cooperation until the engineering complaint was resolved. One resident group asked whether Nia should step away to protect the funding. The humiliation had become larger than a dinner table. It had entered the language people used to decide whether her work could be trusted. Then the insurer's formal notice arrived. Coverage suspended. All Harbor Homes activity frozen. Nia's appointment remained valid on paper, but every practical function attached to it had been taken away. The defeat became real the next morning when Nia's consulting payment failed to arrive and the foundation's project dashboard disappeared from her account. Cross Meridian's complaint had been accepted for preliminary professional review. Acceptance was not a finding, but headlines reduced the distinction before breakfast. Billionaire's daughter faces engineering scrutiny after family foundation dispute. The article used Evelyn's donor memorandum, Nia's visitor badge, and a photograph from the dinner in which she appeared to be seated outside the trustees' circle. No version history. No qualifications. No corrosión allowance. By 9, one of Nia's oldest community partners called to suspend an upcoming project. "It is not personal," the director said. "Our insurer saw the complaint." Nia thanked her for being direct and ended the call before her voice changed. She sat alone in her Atlanta office among rolled plans, soil reports, and the old radio she had promised her uncle she would repair. For the first time since the dinner, composure felt less like dignity than exhaustion. She had acted, disclosed, preserved, and still lost access to the work, income from the contract, public trust, and the construction window she had been trying to protect. Leah called from Harbor Homes. Residents had received notice that the retrofit start date was suspended. 2 elderly tenants were considering moving out permanently rather than waiting through hurricane season. "They are scared," Leah said. "Some are blaming you. They have the right to—" "No, they have the right to answers." Nia closed her eyes. "The answer is that my filing froze the project. The unsafe substitution did that. The process cannot separate those things yet." At noon, the trustees held a preliminary review conference. Nia joined from her office. Evelyn and Everett joined from separate foundation rooms. Miriam opened by confirming 3 facts. Nia's appointment was valid. Her field survey documentation failure was substantiated, and no technical conclusion had yet been independently verified. The trustees will not restore Dr. Langston's authority merely because the appointment process was valid, Miriam said. Nor will we remove her merely because a complaint was filed. Helen explained that the laboratory could not begin until neutral custody was established for every anchor sample. Cross Meridian controlled the third materials container and disputed the chain. Raphael reported that the beneficial ownership documents required authentication through procurement records, not only a public registry. Every decisive question remained unresolved. Evelyn used the uncertainty carefully. Then the responsible course is obvious. Dr. Langston steps away. The foundation appoints a neutral engineer. The contract proceeds where possible, and the family dispute ends. Nia answered before Everett could. A neutral engineer should review the system. The contract should not proceed until the substitute passes. You no longer have authority to direct either decision, Evelyn said. At the moment, that is true. The admission unsettled the room more than denial would have. Nia continued, I propose temporary co-signature oversight if I am reinstated, a full quality control review of my field documentation, neutral custody of all samples, and independent control of the testing protocol. Helen asked, You understand co-signature oversight would limit your authority? Yes. And the documentation review could produce additional findings against you? Yes. Evelyn leaned back, sensing that Nia had accepted terms that made her appear diminished. But Nia was no longer trying to win by insisting on personal control. She was trying to build a process that could survive her exclusion. Miriam conferred with the trustees. Their decision came after 12 minutes. Nia would not be reinstated. Not yet. The consulting suspension would remain. The project freeze would remain. Neutral. Review would proceed without her operational access. Your willingness to accept oversight is relevant, Miriam said. It is not a substitute for verified results. Nia heard the fairness in the ruling and still felt it as defeat. The institution was doing what she had demanded, refusing shortcuts, including shortcuts that would benefit her. Everett requested a private session afterward. He appeared on screen without the foundation backdrop, seated in his home study beneath the framed maritime maps Nia had traced as a child. I can pay the residents' relocation costs, he said. I can fund the testing directly. I can call each trustee tonight. No, you have lost the contract. Temporarily. Your name is in the press. Partners are walking away. I know. Then let me act like your father. Nia looked at him for a long moment. You had that opportunity at dinner. Everett's face changed. That is cruel. It is accurate. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You saw the altered agenda and decided donor comfort mattered more than correcting it. I did not know what Evelyn was protecting. You knew what she was doing to me. He looked down. The silence did not repair anything, but it stopped him from pretending ignorance. What do you want from me now? Recuse yourself. Do not fund the review. Do not call trustees. Do not speak for me. You are asking me to stand aside while you lose everything. I am asking you not to turn my evidence into another favor from a billionaire father. He ended the call without agreeing. That afternoon, the neutral custodian obtained authority over the samples through the Foundation's existing compliance reserve. Cross Meridian was ordered to release the third materials container. Nia sent the container number she had documented from the public sidewalk, then stepped away from the testing protocol. She could no longer guide what happened next. At Harbor Homes, rainwater ran down the unfinished scaffolding while the buildings waited under a suspended contract. At the Foundation, Evelyn received a formal conflict review notice. It included the related party policy, the recovered disclosure line deleted from the earlier memorandum, and a deadline to correct or explain the omission before findings were finalized. She had a clear opportunity to withdraw the donor accusation, disclose Grant Cross's control, and step away from the project. Instead, she signed a declaration stating that neither she nor any immediate relative held a reportable interest in Cross Meridian or its parent entities. The declaration arrived in trustee custody at 4:26 p.m. At 4:31, the procurement auditor received the beneficial ownership filing bearing Grant Cross's signature as controlling member of Meridian Coastal Holdings. Nia did not know either document had arrived. She was in her darkened office, staring at the frozen project schedule and calculating how many days remained before the seasonal construction window closed. Her appointment existed. Her work might still be right. None of it had protected the residents, restored her authority, or stopped the public story that she had failed. For the first time, Evelyn controlled the visible outcome. Nia had no access, no contract, no insurer, and no guarantee the trustees would ever stand beside her. The trustees began without Nia. Miriam Shaw opened the independent review session by excluding Everett, Evelyn, Cross Meridian, donor representatives, and every staff member who had participated in the disputed agenda or procurement communications. The review was paid from the Foundation's pre-existing compliance reserve, and no reimbursement could be accepted from Everett until all findings were final. Rafael Ortiz documented each recusal. Dr. Helen Price approved the testing protocol only after a neutral custodian took possession of all 3 anchor sample sets, including the materials container Nia had identified from the public sidewalk. Cross Meridian protested that the 3rd container had been exposed to uncontrolled conditions. The custodian produced the storage log, seal photographs, transport record, and temperature history. The seals matched the numbers recorded before Nia lost site access. The laboratory accepted the chain. Nia received no private updates and had no role in selecting the reviewers. For 3 days, she worked from her Atlanta office on unrelated projects while the Harbor Home's schedule remained frozen on the corner of her screen. She repaired her uncle's radio after midnight because the work required patience without permission. On the 4th morning, Helen called only to verify Nia's professional seal and ask whether the calculations submitted with Revision 6 were complete. Nia answered the questions and volunteered nothing beyond them. The independent laboratory tested the original system first. Under simulated coastal exposure and lateral loading, the connections remained above the required safety margin. The substitute anchor deformed early during the 2nd sequence. In the final test, 2 of its connections failed below the mandatory threshold. The result did not prove Evelyn's intent, but it proved that Nia's warning had not been manufactured to obstruct the contract. Helen commissioned a separate review of the corrosion assumptions. The reviewer confirmed that the substitute schedule had removed the allowance required for the site's salt exposure. File metadata showed that Nia had flagged the omission before the dinner, before the donor memorandum, and before Cross Meridian filed its complaint. Her sealed calculations matched the approved design stored in the original trustee packet. The review then turned to Nia's own failure. The missing same-day confirmation was real. The subcontractor had requested an access point adjustment verbally, and Nia had not completed the required written confirmation until the technical integrity notice. The professional quality reviewer found no resulting calculation error, concealed safety change, or financial benefit. The lapse justified corrective training and temporary co-signature oversight. It did not justify the claim that her engineering work was unreliable. More damaging to Evelyn was the timestamp. Nia had disclosed the lapse herself before the contractor complaint and before any trustee demanded it. The allegation of concealment could not survive the sequence. Raphael's procurement team authenticated the public registry documents through the original vendor submission, bank certification, beneficial ownership declaration, and tax registration file. Grant Cross controlled Meridian Coastal Holdings, which controlled Cross Meridian Construction. The relationship fell squarely within the Foundation's related party rule. The first version of the contractor recommendation had contained a disclosure note identifying Grant's control. The version distributed from Evelyn's benefit office account did not. Digital history showed the line had been deleted before the memorandum reached donors and staff. The auditors could not prove who physically pressed the delete key, but they established that Evelyn's account circulated the altered version and that she later signed a declaration denying any reportable interest after receiving the policy and a formal correction opportunity. Her declaration was materially false. The governance evidence was equally clear. Leah's resident committee records showed that Nia had submitted under a coded application number, ranked first before her family relationship was disclosed, and survived a competitive interview that included criticism of her accelerated survey method. The trustee appointment resolution was valid. Everett had not attended or voted. The original agenda listed Nia's scheduled briefing. The revised agenda had been generated by Evelyn's office. An internal seating worksheet changed Nia's designation from independent technical director to family guest. The distribution log proved that every trustee had received Nia's professional briefing materials before Evelyn called them family background. Miriam asked the Foundation secretary to state the meaning of those findings carefully. They established that Dr. Langston was independently selected and formally appointed, the secretary said. They do not establish that her engineering conclusions are correct. Helen followed. The independent tests established that. Miriam then separated the identity question. Everett's historical family disclosures and Nia's legal records confirmed that she was his direct legal daughter. The correction defeated Evelyn's suggestion that Nia had exploited an uncertain family connection. It granted no appointment, vote, contract, or technical authority. The trustees interviewed Leah, two resident representatives, the foundation secretary, the neutral custodian, Everett's assistant, and the insurer's compliance officer. Leah testified only to the selection process and resident planning. She did not argue that Nia should be reinstated. The assistant authenticated Everett's receipt of the altered agenda before dinner. When Everett was called into the session, Miriam asked one question. "Did you know before the dinner that Dr. Langston's role had been removed?" He looked toward the empty chair where Nia would have sat if she had been invited. "Yes." "Did you object?" "No, what?" Everett's first answer began with donors, family stability, and the hope of correcting matters privately. Miriam stopped him. "Those are circumstances. What choice did you make?" He lowered his head. "Il chose silence." By evening, the trustees had 6 independent findings. Nia had been legitimately appointed. Her work had been professionally authored and authenticated. The approved system met the safety requirements. The substituted system failed mandatory thresholds. Nia had disclosed a real but correctable documentation lapse, and Evelyn had concealed a related party conflict while publicly misrepresenting Nia's role. The trustees offered Evelyn the written response period required by policy. She was permitted to withdraw her declaration, correct the donor memorandum, and recuse herself before the findings were entered. She submitted a final response insisting that the review had been manipulated to protect Everett's daughter and that no responsible board could trust Nia after the survey failure. Miriam read the response twice, then scheduled a reconvened trustees' dinner in the same room where Evelyn had removed Nia's folder. Nia received the invitation by ordinary foundation email, with no call from Everett and no private assurance. The subject line did not promise vindication. It stated only that she had the right to attend, review the findings, and answer technical questions. For the first time since her contract had been frozen, the institution was not asking her father whether she belonged in the room. The Navy briefing folder was waiting at Nia's place when she entered the Calder House dining room. It rested at the trustees' table beneath a new printed card that read Dr. Nia Langston, Independent Technical Director, subject to final board action. The condition mattered. The trustees had not invited her to receive an apology staged as justice. They had invited her into a process that could still impose limits on her work. Leah and 2 resident representatives sat at the far end of the table with equal access to the project materials. Everett occupied a non-voting chair against the wall. Evelyn stood near the microphone in the same pale silk suit she had worn when she first removed Nia's folder, though the room no longer arranged itself around her. Before Miriam could open the session, Evelyn stepped forward. "I must object to Dr. Langston's presence during discussion of confidential family matters." Miriam did not raise her voice. "There are no family matters on tonight's agenda." Her relationship to Everett is the reason this has become a spectacle. Her relationship to Everett is not the basis of the review. Evelyn looked toward the security supervisor near the door. "She is suspended project staff." Miriam closed the folder before her. "Dr. Langston has a right to attend under the appointment resolution review, the resident participation policy, and the professional response procedure. She will remain." Evelyn's face changed almost imperceptibly. The first time she had tried to remove Nia, the room had waited to see whether Nia would protest. This time the institution answered before Nia needed to. Miriam entered the original agenda, revised agenda, seating worksheet, appointment resolution, and distribution log into the official record. Dr. Langston's role was not informal, she said. It was not granted by Mr. Langston. It was not created by family preference. She was selected through a coded resident review and appointed by trustee vote. Evelyn crossed her arms. Trustees of his foundation. Raphael Anserth. The participating trustees hold fixed terms. Mr. Langston could not remove them during this review, did not select the reviewers, did not fund the process, and has been recused from the outcome. The foundation secretary stated that Evelyn's dinner committee had possessed no authority to alter Nia's appointment, briefing slot, or institutional title. Miriam ordered the dinner minutes corrected to show that Nia had been publicly misclassified. She then addressed the identity insinuation separately. The records confirm Dr. Langston is Everett Langston's direct legal daughter. That correction grants her no professional authority. Her authority must stand on other evidence. Helen presented the laboratory findings without praising Nia. Diagrams showed the tested connections, load sequences, and failure thresholds. The system Nia had approved met the required margin. Cross Meridian's substitute failed 2 mandatory lateral load standards and omitted the required corrosion allowance. The result was repeatable across the preserved samples. Nia's calculations, version history, and professional seal had been authenticated. Helen then displayed Nia's incomplete field survey form. Dr. Langston failed to document a verbal access change within the required period, she said. That failure is substantiated. It requires remediation and temporary co-signature oversight. Evelyn seized the sentence. Then she is not fit to lead. Helen turned toward her. That is not our finding. The omission did not alter the structural design, was voluntarily disclosed before the complaint, and was corrected before testing. Professional accountability does not require us to pretend every error has the same meaning. Raphael presented the procurement findings. Grant Cross's ownership appeared through 4 authenticated sources. The relationship required disclosure. The early contractor memorandum contained the disclosure. The circulated version did not. Evelyn's office distributed the altered document. Her signed declaration, filed after she received the policy and correction notice, denied a reportable relationship that plainly existed. Evelyn looked toward Everett. He did not speak. My brother's investments are not mine, she said. The rule covers immediate family control, Raphael replied. You were given the language before you signed. This board is destroying a donor network over paperwork because Everett's daughter could not tolerate being questioned. Miriam opened the complete donor memorandum beside the corrective filing Evelyn had omitted. You did not question her. You removed an appointed role, presented partial evidence, threatened a resident representative's funding, and submitted a false conflict declaration after an opportunity to correct it. Evelyn's composure finally fractured. She came into this family determined to prove she was better than everyone in it. Nia felt every eye turned toward her, but she did not answer the personal accusation. My work is available for review, she said. My family relationship is not a technical result. Leah placed the resident impact analysis before the trustees. The independent reviewer had confirmed that Nia's construction sequence could keep 79 households occupied and reduce projected emergency relocation days from 1,176 to 96. Leah did not call Nia brave or deserving. The sequence accounts for wheelchair routes, medication deliveries, home health access, and the building's real occupancy, she said. That is why the residents ranked it first. Miriam asked Nia whether she accepted the documentation finding. Yes. Will you complete corrective training and work under temporary co-signature oversight? Yes, if the oversight is independent of donor family control and resident authority is written into the project charter. A defense meant nothing unless the evidence could stand without the family name. Miriam did not say the principle as praise. She stated it as the standard the board had followed. The trustees' action tonight would be the same if Dr. Langston had no relationship to the founding benefactor. She turned to Evelyn. Your request to remove her is denied. The conflicted parties were directed to leave before the vote. Evelyn refused at first, insisting the room existed because of her donor work. Raphael reminded her that failure to comply would become a separate governance violation. She walked out without looking at Nia. Everett rose next. Before leaving, he asked to address the record. Miriam permitted one statement. He stood against the wall rather than moving to the microphone. I received the altered agenda before the dinner, he said. I saw that Nia's role had been removed. I chose not to stop it because I believed private correction would protect the foundation and my marriage. My silence enabled what happened. He did not ask forgiveness. He accepted recusal from Harbor Homes, surrender of his trustee nomination authority for 3 years, and prohibition from directing Nia's appointment, contract, or public response. Then he left. The trustees deliberated with Nia and the residents outside the room. When the doors reopened, Miriam read the vote. 6-0, with one trustee absent for an unrelated disclosed conflict. Nia would be reinstated as independent technical director subject to temporary co-signature oversight, full documentation remediation, resident and trustee governance, and final insurance approval. Her consulting suspension would end when the written charter took effect. Cross-Meridian's substitute system would not be used. The vote was not applause. Thomas Keene stated that he remained troubled by Nia's survey procedure. Helen agreed that leadership required correction, not denial. Raphael warned that the project timeline was still damaged. Miriam then looked directly at Nia. The trustees are restoring the authority that the evidence supports, no more and no less. Nia opened her Navy folder. Then I will accept no more and no less. The room where Evelyn had mocked her now contained an official defense of her right to remain, answer, lead under review, and receive credit for work that had survived independent testing. Yet Nia did not sign the reinstatement that night. She slid the proposed charter back across the table. Resident authority is advisory here, she said. My father's recusal is temporary project language rather than a governance restriction. Correct those sections, and I will return. Miriam studied the pages, then nodded. Nia had regained a place at the table. Her next choice would determine whether the table itself changed. The revised Harbor Homes Charter was completed 4 days later. Resident representatives received binding approval over relocation sequencing, accessibility exceptions, and temporary housing standards. Technical leadership could not be appointed, removed, or reclassified by donors, benefit committees, founding families, or their spouses. Any related party vendor relationship required direct beneficial owner disclosure before bid review. Agenda changes affecting appointed professionals required governance approval and a preserved version history. Everett's recusal became a written prohibition against directing Harbor Homes appointments, contracts, communications, or public statements. His 3-year surrender of trustee nomination authority was filed in the Foundation's permanent governance record. Only after those provisions were signed did Nia accept reinstatement. She completed the documentation remediation plan without complaint. For the first project phase, Helen's independent engineering firm co-signed field changes. Nia did not treat the condition as a stain on her victory. It was the cost of the error she had actually made, separated from the misconduct invented around it. The insurer restored coverage after reviewing the test results, governance charter, and oversight plan. Construction could restart within the remaining seasonal window, though the delay had already cost the project money and trust. Cross-Meridian's contract was terminated for non-disclosure and failure to satisfy the technical requirements. The company retained the right to respond through ordinary procurement procedure, but the unsafe substitute would not return under a new label. A competitive bid process began using Nia's verified specifications. Evelyn's consequences took effect before the longer governance review concluded. She was removed as benefit chair, suspended from donor representative privileges, barred from project communications, and denied control over foundation agendas or trustee materials. The donor memorandum was formally withdrawn. A written correction went to every recipient, stating that Nia had been independently selected, that her technical warning had been verified, and that the incomplete survey form had been circulated without its corrective filing. Evelyn was required to acknowledge the undisclosed related party relationship and false declaration. She refused to sign the first version because it used the word concealed. The trustees replaced it with exact findings and issued the correction under the Foundation's authority without waiting for her approval. Her donor network did not disappear, and she was not ruined. She remained wealthy, married to Everett, and capable of telling herself that the board had overreacted. What she lost was the informal power to convert social influence into institutional fact. Everett's cost was quieter and deeper. The Foundation removed his portrait from the Harbor Homes conference room during the project because his presence could no longer symbolize neutral oversight. He remained the founding benefactor, but had no vote, appointment power, or speaking role in the initiative. When reporters asked whether he had defended his daughter, he answered that the trustees had defended their own verified process and that Nia's work had defended itself. He did not use her first name in public without permission. He did not announce reconciliation. 2 weeks after construction restarted, he sent Nia a handwritten request for one private conversation. She replied that she would meet him after the first building passed inspection. No press, no foundation office, no gifts connected to governance, and no assumption that one meeting meant forgiveness. Everett accepted the terms. Nia kept the Langston surname on her engineering seal. She rejected the succession committee seat Everett had once imagined for her and declined a permanent title within the broader family foundation. Harbor Homes would be one independently governed contract within her Atlanta practice, not the doorway through which the dynasty absorbed her career. She continued teaching her evening engineering workshop. She finished repairing her uncle's radio and returned it with the original wooden dial intact. At Harbor Homes, the first exterior reinforcement began under resident observation. Mrs. Green tested the temporary wheelchair route before the contractor was permitted to close the old one. Leah chaired the resident session rather than sitting at the edge of a donor meeting. Nia presented the safety schedule after the residents presented their concerns. No one introduced her as Everett Langston's daughter. The first building passed inspection 6 weeks later. Nia met Everett at a small cafe overlooking the public pier where he had once taught her to distribute weight through damaged shipping crates. He apologized without explaining his silence again. "I thought keeping the family together was the same as protecting it," he said. "You protected the version that asked the least from you," Nia replied. He accepted the sentence. She did not promise another meeting. She told him that any relationship they built would exist outside her contracts, outside the foundation, and outside his public image. He said he understood. Nia was not certain he did, but understanding was no longer the price of her boundary. The final construction review returned to the Calder House dining room because Miriam wanted the foundation to remember where the governance failure had become visible. The same long table stood beneath the chandeliers. Nia's Navy briefing folder rested before her, but the new project control label carried no family designation. Everett sat in a non-voting chair near the wall. Evelyn was absent under her communication restriction. Trustees, engineers, contractors, and residents filled the remaining places. Miriam invited Nia to begin. Nia passed the microphone to Leah. "Residents first," she said. Leah opened with access concerns from Building B. Mrs. Green described the turning radius at the temporary ramp. The contractor answered. Helen recorded the required changes. Only then did Nia present the structural schedule. No one applauded. They worked. The table no longer decided whether she belonged. It served the project she had chosen to lead under terms she had helped write. They had defended her place at the table, but Nia chose what she would build beyond it. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.